Hi guys, it's me, Lori. You have to think about that being in that Mario voice. I'm going to bring this over just a little bit more and put it where you really can't see where I'm working. So, I thought I would come on and talk about something that was mentioned in a group I'm in. And I'm going to move this too to get that big ball of light out of the way. So, somebody asked about embossing. And she was told it's really hard to explain. I don't think it is. So, I'm going to explain it. Okay, so this is where I want my hands to be. Wish I could straighten that up a little bit for you. There. Okay. So, there are different kinds of embossing. There is the embossing that you do with embossing folders. I like this one. So I think there's thousands of these, like maybe more than thousands. Okay, so you take a piece of paper. And let me just explain the embossing folder to you real quick. Happy Sunday, by the way, and I hope everybody is doing great. When you push down into the embossing folder and the raised side goes into the lower side, that is called embossing. The other side is called debossed. Okay, so I'm going to take a piece of paper out of here. One you'll be able to see it on. So this is going to crack though, I'm going to tell you that. This paper will crack. Okay. There's some tricks to embossing. One is, if you wet your paper, it will emboss better. So, is that the right side? No, but we're going to go ahead and wet this side, okay? Spray it with some water, and it'll puddle because most papers have some type of resist on them. And then turn it down. Flip it over. Get your Big Shot. Now, I cheat with my Big Shot because I have taken my platform apart. I have several of these, and so sacrificing one of them to make it easier was worth it to me. So this one you can't, this is the magnetic plate. It is just for thinlits. But this one is your embossing. You would pick up the first two pieces of, I'll show you. So normally your embossing, your platform looks like this. So you would pick up the first one, the second one, and then you would be here. But then you have these floppy things, and I don't like those floppy things, so I just took them off. So you put that in your Big Shot, you put that down, you put this in, doesn't matter if it's upside or downside, and then you roll it through. Now you can get all sorts of techniques doing this. You can put ink on the inside of your embossing folder, and then it would be distressed all the way over, but I didn't do that. And because I wet it, my paper didn't crack. But usually, if you use this particular type of cardstock, it would crack. So this is the embossed side, and that is the debossed side. And they're both equally pretty, but most people like the embossed side. So that is dry embossing. You can also dry emboss by hand. When you make flowers and you form them, that's dry embossing also. So there's that. Now there is heat embossing. Heat embossing is a lot of fun. Can't put this plate. It won't hold its thing, so I always leave my magnetic plate in because that's the one I use the most. Okay, so let's get rid of this. So you die cut something, or you stamp in embossing ink, and you can wet emboss. This is when I'm going to have to blind you a little bit because I've got to get my glass mat. I'll try not to blind you too much. So, here are some embossing powders, and I'll explain the difference. And there is, I'm going to show you something on here. Okay, there's different techniques to embossing, and probably everybody has their own little click. So using this piece of paper, because we've already embossed it, you can emboss on the top of this. Wet embossing is you take embossing liquid, which would be Versamark for me, but there's many more out there. This is just the one I like the best because it is oil based. And then you take embossing powders. There is also embossing glitters. Doesn't matter. But I'm going to just pick one that's going to show up on here. So you take your embossing pad and just kind of gently go over the top of this. Okay? Okay? Then you want to have something you can make a funnel out of to pour back in, and this is the piece of paper I always use. And don't worry about you have to work so quickly because oil-based embossing powder does not dry that fast. So let's bring this down just a tiny bit so you can see, and take an end you can hold and put this on top. You're probably going to use the whole jar when you put this on top. And then just kind of like do it the best you can. We're not looking for complete coverage. We're just looking for good coverage. We want to flick and get all of it off, like so. I really don't want it right there too much, but it's right there now. And just rub off what you think you don't want. You can always add more, but I'm pretty sure this is good for me. Set it aside for a minute. You want to do this because this is bad if you don't. You want to get this back in here real quick. So tap it down, get the sides, and then get it back in the jar, or it will blow everywhere, and that's not good. And then what's left, we're going to give it a tap in the trash. And we're just going to give this a little wipe too, because we don't want it everywhere. And then put the lid on here. And if you want to know what color this is, it's called the Wow Embossing Powder Metallic Gold Rich Super Fine. Okay, get your heat gun and then watch the magic happen. You see how it looks kind of grody right now? Put your heat gun a minute to get up to where it can melt the powder. But isn't that pretty when it starts to melt? So pretty. And if you want to go back over this in a different color, you can. You can go over this as many times as you want. Now, you have to stop as soon as you start seeing all of the powders have melted, because you will catch your paper on fire if you don't. So I do have a little unmelted right there. So I'm going to go back in and melt it. Okay. Isn't that so pretty? And we do have a little bit that didn't get embossing powder, so it will just brush off. So don't fret. Don't fret. So pretty. Okay, so that's one way to heat emboss. Another way to heat emboss is to use a die cut. And that is probably the most common way to heat emboss. And there's different embossing powders. There's chunky embossing powders. There's fine embossing powders. And then you have the Stampin' Up! Variety of embossing powders. And those are probably the most common. There's distress embossing powders. And they're very pretty also. So let's find our die cuts. I did get out some die cuts. So, is that a white leaf? No. You can emboss anything. Absolutely anything. Metal, paper. That's a pretty one. Okay, let's do that one. Okay, so, and then you can emboss with ink also. It doesn't have to be first mark, but it has to be a slower drying ink than, because see, some people always want the colors, the different colors of embossing. And that's great, because I like colors. You like colors, I like colors, everybody likes colors. So let's find a good stamp with a good outline that I can wash. How about the key? Okay. So we're going to just stamp the key, right? Hopefully this is juicy enough to pick the ink up. And we're just using Stays On. Okay? And I'm just going to show you on this piece of paper. Stamp your stamp. and this stays on. Come back with an embossing powder. Oh! Go over it. This is a weird one. This one smells like peppermint. Okay. Ugh. Okay. Hopefully this is what happens when your embossing powder gets old, by the way. And just tap it back in there best you can. I'm going to tap this over the trash. Put the lid back on this. This may not work. I think this one may be too old. I'm telling you, this one is so old. Ah! Okay, go on. Okay. Ugh, it stinks. It smells like peppermint, and usually peppermint does not stink, but this stinks. Okay. And then you got to go over this. And so we have lightly, very lightly, embossed that key. You can rub your hand over it and you can feel it. So that's what happens when you emboss with ink. I'm going to clean my stamp real quick. I don't know why we keep moving. I don't like to leave stays on my stamps. I got real issues with that. Okay. Okay, so that's what you get when you stamp with and then go over it with the embossing ink. Okay? That's not embossing ink. That stays on. I'm so sorry. So now I'm going to show you a die cut. Because literally you can emboss anything. So here's our die cut. And we're just going to go over it with the embossing ink. We're going to put it in the embossing ink and just do that. And we're not going to do all of it. So we'll come back with the distress. I like the distress inks. I think the distress colors, when you put them on the embossing, are very pretty. Okay. I got a piece of trash in here. It's been in here for a long time and I finally saw it. So let me pull that out real quick. Okay. So there's our leaf. Kind of tan. Very flat. No anything interesting to it. My cat is not interested in all what we're doing. He's like, no, I don't want to see this anymore. Okay. So then we just take our heat gun. I like watching it. And it just melts. Okay, so did you see me turn the die over? The die cut, you want to get the back of this too when you're doing this. So then let's wave it just for a minute. Let it cool down. Isn't it pretty though now? See, now it's all shiny. So then let's come back with a different color of, oh, just in case you want to know, that one is called Tattered Rose. So, and you can mix and match your embossing inks also. I'm going to find, I have to go get a different thing. This is Stampin' Up, and this is a more typical embossing powder. It's not real fine, it's not distressed, and this is one of my favorites. It's very green. Okay, so we're going to put it back in the embossing ink and just kind of do a different area of it, or you can do the same area, but we just want to get the embossing stuff on a different area. Anyhow, you're getting the general idea of how to heat emboss. It's got a lot more on it than what I wanted, but it's okay. Okay, so let's heat emboss this one. I like that. Okay, so there it is, two-toned. But we're not going to stop at two-tone. We're going to let it melt or let it finish drying. And let's get a darker color brown, like fired brick is probably a good one. Then we're going to dip it again. And we're going to be much more picky this time about where we put our embossing. Okay, just a little bit too, not a bunch. Yeah. Isn't that so pretty? I think it is so pretty. And then this is our last color we're going to add, but this is really going to like put it over. And see that just like melts, they melt together And so you kind of have an autumn fall leaf that's just barely turning. I think that is so pretty. Then I'm just going to show you one more thing and then I will just stop. But okay, so we have this beautiful leaf, right? And you can do so much more with this leaf. But let's just show you the last thing. We're going to put this in here and we're going to cover it as best we can. We want this totally covered. Okay. Totally covered. And then we're going to take this extra ultra thick embossing powder. And this is so thick, it looks like sugar. Literally. When you pour it on, it looks like sugar. Like you got a big pile of sugar. And then you have to press this in. This is, you want to press this in. Okay? Then get it out. Just like it's some weird breakfast treat. And give it a good tap on both sides. And then set it there. Well, let's get this back in this jar. Put this back down. Put the lid back on because you do not want that stuff everywhere. And then let's heat it. Oh, this one is so much fun to watch. And it starts melting almost immediately. Is that not so cool? Okay, and as soon as you start seeing it lift up just a tiny bit, like bubble, that's what you would say, bubble. Look at that. It looks like glass. I love that. So it has gave our little leaf extra dimension. You're going to burn yourself if you try to touch this right now, but whew. And then I'm going to hit it. I'm going to hold this right here, and where I was holding it at, I'm going to just hit it so it melts. There you go. It is so pretty. I love it. Okay, so that is the difference between dry embossing and heat embossing. And heat embossing is very simple. It takes no skill, just takes a heat gun, and it takes embossing powder. And you don't have to have a whole bunch of embossing powder. I just have different ones, but I don't have tons and tons. Because you get your different effects by mixing them. So pretty. Let me see. I can probably show you better. Look at that. Isn't that so pretty? I love it. I love it. I love it. I love it. Okay, guys, that's it. There's nothing else to tell you or show you. These dry within just a couple seconds, usually. And that's it. I love it. So pretty. So, I will just talk to you guys later. And I hope you have a great Sunday. And have a nice day, guys.